Welcome to Praise Hands, home of the Praise Hands, where we are all about creative, cross-cultural Christianity. I'm your host, Robbie Valderrama. For many of us, the past few weeks and months have been filled with uncertainty, anxiety, and just straight up chaos. But what if this season also served as a reset, a chance for us to honestly evaluate and reformulate the way we live our lives and pursue the mission of God? Today's guests, Brian Sanders and Kathryn Eng, believe it's exactly that, and they share how their small churches are having a huge impact at the edges of society. Let's head on in. All right, welcome, Brian and Kathryn. We're all over the world right now. Great to have you guys on the show.
Thanks for having us.
A lot of time zones are represented here, aren't they?
There are. So, Brian, tell us about where you are at in this very present moment and what you're doing out there.
Well, like you, I'm probably in my house. I think that's the common denominator. My house right now is Dublin, Ireland. So that's where we are. I have 6 kids, but only 2 are here with me. So Monica, my wife, and the last 2 are here on quarantine in lovely Dublin. So that's where we are.
Oh, cool. And Kathryn, you are in the Tampa area.
I am. I'm in Tampa. I'm also at home, working from home remotely. Still, we run a clinic here as part of the underground. So we're still trying to care for our patients and keep up with them in the middle of all of this.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you guys again for hopping on the show. Just to kind of give a big overview of your universe of things, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. We've got a couple components. We've got the Underground Network, which is this worldwide network of microchurches and missional movements that are really reaching, in a lot of cases, the urban poor. And there's not a clear definition of what the gospel looks like in those contexts yet. And you guys are bringing them to those. That Underground Network is global. Then you've got Tampa Underground, which is kind of where the movement started, as I understand it, several years back. And maybe you can share a little bit of that story. And then a part of that Tampa Underground is something called the Underground Free Clinic, which Kathryn, you are overseeing. And then Brian, you're kind of the starter. And I'm sure you had a lot of friends that did that with you of this whole network. So is that a fair summary of this universe of things?
Yeah.
Not bad, man. Not bad. Well done.
Oh, thank you. So just to kick you guys off, maybe it would be a cool place to start and hearing about this underground network, how it came to be. I can relate to your story, Brian, in that in college, a lot of us friends, we, ran ministries and did all these things, and it was very communal. And then coming out of that, I got married right after leaving. So I lived in a ministry house with 17 guys during college. And then as soon as college ended, it was me and my wife, like all alone in this house by ourselves. And there was a severe drop off of community. So tell us about that experience of starting the network. What was that process like for you? What problems did you see? And how did that play out for you?
Well, it probably should be said first that we were not really church people, church planter, church leaders. We all came from a parachurch, like a college ministry. Mm-hmm. There is a kind of pedigree to that, like you're not afraid to raise money. You see yourself essentially as missionaries. You don't really think about the sacramental life. Really see yourself as fluid, mobile, contextual, rooted in some ways in a place and people, but not one building or something like that. But the truth is, you get a little older, you go to church, like we all went to churches, right? But also felt like an increasing dissonance with that experience.
Right.
That's the bottom line. A kind of growing frustration. And, when you're young and you think you know everything, some of that stuff is right. Like the analysis is right, but maybe the heart behind it isn't great, or there's a lot of hubris, there. But so if I'm honest, the underground really, it started as a protest, as a way of saying like, this isn't right.
Sure,
this isn't good enough. But surely there must be another way to be the church, to do the church. There's got to be a way. The church was meant to organize itself more prominently around the idea and the mobilization of people into mission based on maybe what God calls them to do or tells them to do, whatever. But it changed, it evolved. So when we left the church, to venture out and start something new, it didn't stay a protest for long. Protest can only be your driving thing when you're against something, but when you're actually trying to create, trying to build, first of all, you realize that some of the things you were saying aren't true, like you were wrong. It's more complicated than you thought. You're humbled by that, But then some of the stuff is just the ideas needed to be tested.
Right.
So I would say it started as a
Right.
protest and became experiment, like a true experiment. Let's see if we could create like a clinical environment where we're not contaminated by this previous system. I mean, really start over, start from scratch, rethink everything, every system, every approach, every construct.
Yeah.
With a bias towards mission. What could it look like? And then we needed to test those ideas. So for a while, I mean, for a few years, for maybe 5 years, it was really just an experiment. Like, let's see if this works or not. Eventually, it became like a family. In that sense, it is like a macro church, like a community. And the really cool thing, the interesting thing is to realize that our kind of values, our collective corporate values, they sort of ring a bell with people all over the world. If you describe not what you're trying to do, like not a vision statement or a mission statement, but you describe who you're trying to be, essentially, like aspirational values. What we found now is like actually there's just people all over the world that are saying, this is my heart. I have the same hope, the same dream. And so now it's sort of this bigger family, this global family. And I don't want to give the impression that we're running around the world starting all these movements. We're not. They're finding us. We're finding them. It's just more like family, like cut from the same cloth, speaking the same language, feeling the same longings, the same urges almost. Right. And we need each other. So our kind of network, our family of movements around the world is really more about finding what God was already up to and thinking we're kind of the same, or we're kind of describing our hope for the church in the same way,
Right. That's really good. And speaking of learning from people around the world, one of the unique things that you did was you traveled to Manila, and I'm half Filipino, so I know a little bit about the Philippines.
Awesome.
And have been there a couple times. And you went there to learn how their churches were interacting with the urban poor. Now, I think that's significant. And one of the things that we've talked about a fair amount is the state of American Christianity, and in particular, some of the numbers in global Christianity, and how that's really dramatically impacting the balance of power and influence in the church. It's not easy to find examples of people from the American church that have gone from like the first world to the third world, or, down that spectrum, if you will, to learn. So why did you fly halfway across the world to the Philippines in this learning journey?
Well, it's a long story of how we decided on Metro Manila as the context. If you're going to innovate or you're going to think differently, you have to kind of separate yourself from the prevailing notions, right? Because we're all kind of committed, whether we admit it or not. We're sort of brainwashed by our context and by the way things are done. So we knew we had to break free of that somehow, like actually intellectually.
Right.
So I just thought the best way to do that is to change everything, to change the context. And then humility, right? Submit yourself to some people and say, look, we don't really know how to do anything. Like, teach us everything. So
right.
In the end, we looked all around the world, the developing world.
Right.
Christianity is not thriving so much in global north. It's not thriving in the Western church. It's thriving in the South. Now, don't get me wrong. The church in the developing world has lots of struggles. It's not perfect. But the ways in which it's strong are the ways in which we are weak.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's the antidote. It feels like the antidote for what's wrong with us,
Yeah.
So a lot of it's just submission, like go somewhere and learn from some people that will just utterly change your world. Like, they just see the world in a totally different way. And then also like breaking free and having enough times. What we did, there was 9 of us, 9 adults and our 10 kids. And what we did is we like planted ourselves in an urban slum. During the day, we would work alongside these Filipino church planters who were just rock stars. I mean, like out of this world, sacrificial, live with the poor. That in and of itself is going to completely alter who you are, as a Christian, as a person, as a husband, whatever. And then at night, we would sneak away. We essentially designed the underground in that 9-month period that we were there.
Right.
It's just looking for inspiration. It's looking for teachers, mentors. I think you're right. We really have made a mistake, I would say, in the past 40, 50 years of not listening to God's people. We're doing all the publishing, right? We have access to the press, to the blogs, to
all the industries.
Yeah, so we're the ones that are controlling the conversation. But actually, where is the real reservoir of fruit of God's Spirit at work? don't get me wrong. Of course, God is at work in our contexts. Absolutely, 100%. But there's just ways in which something really beautiful has been happening in our lifetime. We're just not dialed into it because we don't have a way to. Unless you go there, say, hey, tell me everything, reshape everything. We benefited from that. The experience of getting away, just think differently. I mean, that's kind of what's happening to the world right now. Is sort of being shocked. The defibrillator of this experience is kind of like, changing everything. And that's what we were trying to do, was go somewhere, submit. But also, if you're interested in creating a church for the poor, don't you need to listen to them or include them in the design of that? So that's the other problem, is we're middle-class people, right? We're college-educated people. So we better get in some serious friendships and dialogue with those people if we're going to create a different kind of church.
Yeah, that's really good. I'll ask you one more question, Brian, and then I'm really excited, Kathryn, to dig into everything you're doing with the clinic, and I'm sure more aspects of Tampa Underground. Here at Praise Hands, we're all about creative, cross-cultural Christianity. And so, Brian, on the creative side of things, you recently shared with Outreach Magazine that the best that Western civilization has to offer finds its roots in the creativity of the church. And you talked about how it's in the broken pieces of situations like COVID-19 that we find the church being reshaped to fit the mission of God in new places, new people, and new contexts. So amidst the pain, uncertainty, and whatnot of COVID-19, how are these models of missional microchurches uniquely equipped to be adaptable and to be the hands and feet of Jesus to the people around you?
Yeah, that's a good word, adaptable. It's a lot of it has to do with fluidity and change management. The bigger the organization, the more difficult change will be, and the more difficult the management of change will be. So in a rapidly changing environment, organizations which are not good at rapid change are going to struggle and possibly become insolvent. That is a possibility. I remember when I was 5 years old, we lived in this apartment complex. By the pool, there was this vending machine. These two vending machines. And it was always locked. They had this gate thing. You just could hardly ever get to the vending machine.
Mm-hmm.
But I was so small that I would just sit by the gate, and anybody that came to use the vending machine, I would just charge them something, or I would ask them to buy me something. And it was a competitive advantage to be small. So microchurches, that's our word, missional communities, whatever, microchurches, they fit through the bars right now. Whatever these sort of barriers where big organizations are going to struggle to figure out, what do we do with this gate in front of us, with these bars in front of us? And the smaller the expression of the church, the more adaptable it is to change. I was on the subway recently in New York, and I'd never seen something like this. It just tripped me out. It was an advertisement for Arnold bread. It was simply small. This is what the branding of this little loaf of bread was. It was simply small, only 19 slices.
Okay.
It said only 19 slices. I'm like, who's advertising that you have less slices? I just didn't get that. I presume it's something like, if you live in the city, you live by yourself, you buy a loaf of bread, half it goes moldy or something. It's too much bread, So the fact that they wanted to market small loaf in the big city, it's something about that context you just don't need. If you live alone and you live in that New York lifestyle, half your bread is going to rot. It's going to get moldy.
Sure.
Trying to create something that fits that world, that lifestyle, that experience. It's simple, it's small, it's only 19 slices. This is exactly why microchurches are promising in a moment like this, because it's more likely to fit. And then microchurches are planted everywhere people are. That's the other issue right now, is how is the church going to disperse anything? How will it distribute anything? Love, hope, healing, friendship, support, words of encouragement, meals, whatever it is that we sense, oh man, we need to do this quickly. And so the smaller your distribution of the church, the more equipped it is essentially to deliver, which is a great word. I mean, to deliver the sacramental life of the kingdom, whatever that means, hope, love, prayer, the gospel.
You also think of the Exodus and the delivery there.
Exactly. The deliverance from whatever troubles you, or from the evils even that we're facing in all those ways. So the smaller we are, the more advantages you have in certain circumstances, in certain situations. And I think maybe a mistake we've made in the past, before this moment, this current cultural moment, is to think bigger is just better. Surely a bigger church is better than a smaller church, or the bigger the church, the more significance it has, the more impact it can have, the more sort of effect it can have on the zeitgeist or whatever. And that's not really true. Really big, massive churches don't necessarily have the same kind of impact as the same amount of people, but broken up and dispersed into lots of smaller places. So, I think the bigger is better error, I guess you could say, is also maybe being exposed slightly. And it's a moment for us to say, well, maybe we should prefer possibly to be broken up into smaller bits, smaller uses. And then again, you're interested in creativity and art and beauty and things like that. It's like exponentially more creative to give, to empower the people of God to take ownership over these little niche versions of the church, which are everywhere. It won't be as good. They won't have as good a music, maybe, or they won't have as good a preaching, or they won't certain education they won't do as well. But man, just on aggregate, the creativity of that approach is it's stunning. It's like breathtaking, mind-blowingly beautiful. The tapestry of what's possible when you look at the whole thing, when you pan out and look at the whole thing. So I'm not excited about COVID. I mean, it's a horrific situation, but for what it could mean for the church and us reevaluating the church, there's plenty of reason to be hopeful.
Yeah, that's really good. I think there's a term, I believe it's called aggregate efficiency, where it essentially talks about any sort of, whether it's a country or whether it's a company, how efficiently they're utilizing resources and assets. I think that's one of the things that, in light of environmental concerns and in light of a number of different concerns, people are trying to figure out, what is the right combination of structure and lack of structure to get the aggregate efficiency of resources to be as optimal as possible. And so I think it's really fascinating to see what you guys are doing. Kathryn, in this time of sickness, the vast majority of churches have little to no infrastructure in place to provide pastoral medical care to their communities. What's your story with getting involved with the underground clinic? How did it come to be, and how has it enabled you to care holistically for your community, both prior to and during this pandemic?
I really started coming around the underground during college. I was doing things with the homeless in the area. I was curious. I was new to following Jesus and wanted to learn. Like Brian was talking about, a lot of their core values really struck a chord in my heart. And I aspired to be the kind of follower of Jesus that they were talking about. So I continued to come around, and we were talking about creativity earlier. The underground is a place that really fosters and encourages creativity. Part of creativity is trying things and failing sometimes, but even that is a beautiful thing. All our people are invited to create alongside our Creator God, and something that had been on my heart for a long time, just believing that we all have a calling. I remember being a teenager, and my best friend, Anna, her parents were both doctors, and they had a free clinic in the inner city of Jacksonville, Florida. And the more I hung out with her, because she was always there, I started going there too and volunteering. And then it became like an everyday thing. And I just loved being there. And it was really part of my discipleship. And it was sort of the first time I think I remember feeling the pleasure of God over something I was doing, and just fulfillment in that work. And so I graduated high school and left and went to college, and just sort of filed that away in my brain as that's something I love and I want to do one day. And I'm not sure how to do that, but I'm going to find a way back to that. So then, go through college. I'm in and out of the underground, still kind of doing the college student thing. And then when I graduated, I ended up coming on staff with the underground, and just being able to learn from a lot of those leaders and the mission that they were doing, and realizing that maybe this free clinic thing is my calling that God put on my heart at an early age. And I can do this here with this community of people. I can try and fail and tweak and do it alongside people that share the same heart as I do, and the same heart for people in need and people without. Yeah, so I decided to start it with the underground. It's technically a department of the underground, but it really functions like a ministry, like a microchurch. And we're a free clinic that serves the poor, but we work under the assumption, the definition that there is the financial poor, the relational poor, and also the spiritual poverty. And we want to meet people's needs in a holistic way, consider them as a whole person and all the things that they need. In the same way that, I don't know, some of our microchurches that are based out of like a neighborhood or something use proximity as an avenue for the gospel, or addiction ministry or something as a tool for the gospel. We use medicine. We definitely want to provide patients everything they need, the highest quality medical care at our disposal. But we also want to bring them to Jesus. We're going to pray for them during their appointments. We're going to ask them what their greatest need is. We're going to spend a little bit longer in the exam room talking to them. We want to know them, and we want to teach them to approach the throne with their prayer request and restore that relationship with Jesus. And I think what's unique about the underground too is it's a lot of like social needs that are out there in all the microchurches. It's like there's physical healing, and then we can help introduce them or bring them back to Jesus. And then there's all these people groups that are around social services to bring them community and try to meet all of those needs that people have.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And in terms of any particular stories that you might be able to share, is there one that you could share with us of particular impact that your clinic has had on maybe a person or a community?
Yeah. One of my favorite things, I think our whole team, our favorite thing that we do is treat patients for hepatitis C. Most of them that are positive are addicts in recovery. And so for them, walking this road of recovery, it means dealing with consequences of choices they've made in their past. And sometimes that kind of diagnosis is shameful or embarrassing. And they show up at the clinic in a really vulnerable state, I think, vulnerable place. And we just really feel like that is a kingdom moment, that we get to be a part of this work of restoration God is already doing in their life. And the unique thing about Hep C is it's something that can be cured. And depending on the person, the virus, the genotype, you could be cured in like 8 to 12 weeks for the most part. And we have to see them a lot during that treatment period. And so it is, I think, just a really beautiful opportunity to meet with patients frequently, get to know them, pray for them throughout this journey, and then at the end, be able to tell them you're cured and you're free from this thing. You have a second go at this. Jesus sees you. He cares about you. This thing that you feel like comes with a lot of shame or embarrassment from choices that you made, Jesus cares about you. And he literally is giving you a clean slate to start over. I guess it's been about 3 years that we've been doing that. And I think for my whole team, it's been like ministry to us. It's been a really rewarding journey to walk with patients on that.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing all of that. I want to ask some more questions about the model of what you all are doing in Tampa and obviously beyond as well. So maybe we'll start with Kathryn. You are in Tampa right now, and on this cross-cultural side of things, many of your micro churches in the area are focused on a particular cultural group. However, across Tampa Underground, the collection of people is extraordinarily diverse. How does the structure of Tampa Underground equip you to see reconciliation happen across economic and racial lines?
I mean, I think the underground is a bunch of people saying yes to what God has called them to, saying yes to mission and that core base thing. And you're right, we are really diverse, both ethnically, culturally, and then just our unique mission niches are very diverse. We're different, but we've all said yes to that same thing. It's a creative expression. It's like contextualization, I think. And everyone is not the same. Everyone probably would not have wanted to or been able to start a clinic. And I probably can't go mentor men in addiction or victims of domestic violence or something. But there's a a general like respect and admiration, I think, for everyone and what they're doing, for our differences and the different ways that God has called us to. It's something that I think unites us, even though we're all very different, come from different
Yeah,
backgrounds.
that's really cool. Maybe something we can draw out that is one of those unique features about what's going on. And I'll open this up to either one of you guys that wants to share. In Tampa, your community comes together on Sunday mornings, maybe not everybody, but a good chunk of people in a building you affectionately call the hub. In many local church buildings, the focal point is the sanctuary, but for you, it's a co working space. Why?
Well, because mission is also worship. I wouldn't say that we don't value the gathering together for worship. I would just say for us, it's more of an outcome of missional commitment. It's like a Romans 12 kind of version of worship, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, and that is good worship. That's pleasing, acceptable worship. So us co-conspiring, in little corners and collaborating and finding ways to work with each other for these just myriad of kind of missional causes in a room 5-6 days a week is also worship. And then it's just efficiency. You were talking about that earlier, like aggregate, whatever efficiency. This is a better use of a building. So if someone gave me a church building, so well, what's the biggest room? I would want to use that for the work of mission, daily kind of dreaming, scheming for the work of mission, and maybe the lesser room would go for a weekly gathering or something like that. But it's like, when Jesus said pray, I don't know that he was necessarily saying pray that, you can have big worship services. I think it was like pray that the kingdom would come, that his will would be done on earth as it is in heaven. So that's what the co-working space is. It's trying to figure out how to do that in lots of different places with lots of different kinds of people, and you talk about reconciliation, like it is hard right now for differing kinds of people to coexist. I mean, it is a rough time to trust. It's just really hard. And actually, I wonder sometimes if a direct campaign, like let's all get in the same room and let's just like be reconciled. It's like, it's unlikely that that's going to happen. In fact, the more time we spend doing stuff like that, the more we seem to dislike each other. The more we see what we don't hold in common, or actually where we differ. But I think if we can triangulate this other way, say, look, I'm going to do what I'm called to do, you do what you're called to do. And as long as you're bringing the kingdom somehow to some place, to some people, then I'm with you. We're together. And then when and where we can collaborate and build relationships and trust and share resources and dismantle kind of oppressive previous systems and stuff, we do it. We need to do that. Almost like not a direct campaign toward those goals. It's an outcome, possibly. This commitment to the mission of God wherever you sense it. So whatever battle you're fighting, whatever injustice you're confronting, you do your bit, I'll do my bit. And somehow in the end, when it works, we have this deep respect for each other, deep love for each other. And as we sort of look across the room, we think, that's my brother, that's my sister.
I do think looking across the room, or when I give a tour of the hub and you walk around, it is something that gives you, like, wells up this spirit of worship as you look around and you think, this office represents a community of men struggling with addiction. This office represents, like, Nancy trying to help people that are immigrating here, or mentoring young Black girls, or college ministry. And you can just kind of go the room. And I think personally it's something that spurs me on in my own work to know that I'm in the midst of all these different things. This is the kingdom of heaven, what it looks like coming here in Tampa.
Yeah, that's so good. I remember back in college, our different ministries had the tension between saying, hey, everybody come to our college ministry and just make this your main thing versus, yeah, we want you to come to us, but we also want you to be involved with other groups on campus. And to me, my ideal model of campus ministry was to say, yeah, be plugged in with us at a certain level, but everybody should be in other groups. This shouldn't be your only group that you're in on campus. And so I love that. It sounds like looking around the room, you'd be able to see, yeah, we're all here on mission together, but it represents all the shades of the city. And to that point, we can be able to be in the position to love our city in a way that nobody else can. And something I want to chat through with you guys is how financially sustainable are microchurches, and what can church leaders learn from the relational and financial structure of your network?
Well, we're sort of dancing around the idea of the relationship between a centralized expression of church and a decentralized expression of church. I think that's right. Just even that question is the right question. Like, what is the relationship? Who does what? Allocation of responsibility. Even just saying, okay, let's imagine a dual operating system. Let's do that. Let's just imagine that there's a bit that's centralized and there's a bit that's decentralized. That's out there.
Right.
And then what we would argue is the centralized bit exists to serve the decentralized,
Mm-hmm.
not the other way around. So maybe a mistake I would say we've made is when we think about small groups or cells or action groups or life groups or even house churches that are under a church, we think that's about possession or ownership. Like, those are our small groups. Those are our of First Church of whatever. I would just reverse that. So structurally, I do think that's an important distinction to make. To actually say, these are the churches. They are served by this other thing. So the other thing is maybe less significant than the decentralized version. There's a guy called John Cotter, who's a Harvard Business School don. I've been actually critical of some of this stuff. He wrote a book in 1996 called Leading Change, which is just like an obsession of church leaders. It's like a 20th century idea that's no longer helpful. But he talks about like vision, and I'm sort of critical of that. But in Cotter's defense, in 2011, I think he wrote a book called Accelerate, which is a kind of correction of some of the ideas that he had in Leading Change. I'm not saying he was wrong, but saying essentially like the world is changing here. What we were talking about before, like how you lead, how you structure organizations has changed. And fascinatingly enough, he makes an argument for a dual operating system. He says that the modern organization has to have these two things. So he's even just talking about business, enterprise, whatever. He's saying you have to have the kind of centralized hierarchical structure, right? Hire, fire, funding, boards, whatever. And then you have to have this completely autonomous, decentralized, nodal, networked, released, distributed thing. Sales, I don't know, however you want to look at it, platform, that kind of thing. And he says that the hierarchy serves the decentralized. That's how it has to be in the 21st century. That's the kind of successful archetype, for enterprise. Well, that's exactly what we were saying in 2006. That's exactly what we came up with when we were trying to design what the church would look like, is these two systems. So the underground has a platform of services that serves what we call microchurches, missional communities, whatever you want to call them. And I do think that structure is fundamental to what we're doing. It's not just a matter of saying, hey, I'm a church, I'm going to say yes to a bunch of missional stuff. Organizations, churches, entities, enterprise, they all have immune systems. So that idea, let everybody go do mission, is going to get attacked by the system itself. So even if every single human person involved says, we love this idea of saying yes to people's creative calling and their ideas, but the system itself, this sort of disembodied thing, will eat you alive. It will attack you. It will say no because it perceives that as a threat, because it is actually a threat to the prevailing model. I think it's really great that you're asking a question about structure, because we love ideas and we love saying, yeah, I'm down with that. I see that in scripture. It feels right to me. It feels timely. I want to say yes to this. But if we don't look at the deep magic, of our church systems, it won't work. It won't find purchase in the soil there.
Yeah, that's so good. It's so important to get that right. There's a million things that come to mind. I mean, I think obviously of the kind of centrifugal and centripetal forces that Alan Hirsch talks about. And I do think this is a huge issue, even in terms of political systems, in terms of economic systems, all these sort of things. It has to be a combination of both.
Well, you asked the question about financial sustainability too. So this is related, because if the decentralized thing is the more important thing, the more essential thing, right? That actually is free, or it can be free, right? It can be done just out of the margin of people's lives. Now, microchurches are not one thing. They can be a business. They can be a parachurch kind of thing. They can be nonprofits. They can be proper churches, But the truth is, If we shut down tomorrow, if the underground just like all the funding ceased, all the people on staff disappeared, those microchurches would go on. Like they would not be stopped. Now they wouldn't be served. They might not thrive or flourish. We see that as essentially our work to help them thrive or flourish. They would live on, they would live on. So even that, like disentangling the core work of the church, the delivery of the sacramental goods of the kingdom, to disentangle that actually from funding, from direct funding is important. So then where the funding is coming in, we raise money, we collect money from the people involved, we sell things, we, rent out our building, we look for avenues of revenue, whatever. We try everything we can to get money in order to help those guys thrive, in order to help them start up, to give them grants. We give away half the money we raise back to them, back to grants and startups and so on. So we could cease to exist. So the financial model it's not perfect, dude. It needs work. I think future iterations are already starting to improve on what we started or what we tried. And it's going to need a lot of work. But even that distinction, the one is not necessarily immune from financial ruin. Like we could go under if we lose our donors, just like everybody else.
Sure.
The centralized part. But the beauty of it is that the microchurches are not necessarily right.
One question that I've got on the topic of microchurches on the podcast, This Cultural Moment, Mark Sayers, who has inherited Red Church from Alan Hirsch down in Australia, I believe it is. He made the observation that in a lot of missional communities that are more the microchurch, they have a danger of, we have talked in the past about the church colonial model, where the church has in its mission activity essentially function to colonize. And his concern was actually that the reverse can happen in some microchurches, in that as that force goes out, we can actually become colonized by the systems of the world as opposed to the reverse. How do you address that and how do you manage that?
Well, first of all, Mark Sayers is just an amazing dude. And I think that's a really deep insight. I guess I would say I agree with him, but I don't want to talk about that. It's like private business of people that are a few years down the road on this. My feeling is like, hey guys, just get to work. You know what I mean? Just get back into the field and mobilize your people and then come back to us in a few years when those problems hit you, and then will. And he's right. And that is the threat. The threat of kind of putting all your eggs in that basket is we get tainted. Look, I sent all my kids to a public high school because I wanted them to be missionaries. I wanted them to be missional, and I put them in like one of the hardest high schools in our city. So much so that my first two kids didn't have a single Christian friend, not a single Christian friend. And they were missionaries. And my third child, it ate her alive. And I totally regret it. So the first two were kind of fruitful in mission, struggled with friendships. And the third one, it's like cost her everything. So look, mission is hard. It is literally like taking ground from the devil. It's light in darkness. So when you go into dark places, that dark is going to get on you. There is a transference. There is a threat to your soul, to your spirit, which maybe goes back to the issue of like community. Like we're not a part of a centralized thing. So I'm not a proponent of just totally decentralized, just house church movement stuff, or even just the basic kind of like disciple making movement stuff, which is beautiful. And I'm totally on board. But when it's disconnected from anything centralized, it faces these exact problems. And I think it's too much of a risk. It's too great of a threat to them, to their spiritual lives, to their doctrine, to discipline. Like people do bad things, man. They make mistakes, they sin, they get things wrong, they hurt each other, they steal money. I mean, all this stuff's going to happen in microchurches too. It's not so sanctified, it's still human people doing that work. So I mean, I just think that's exactly right. That is a threat. And we're looking at that. We see that all the time. We desperately need the greater community, the macro kind of community to somehow be a counterbalance to that stuff. But again, I don't want people listening to think, that's a reason not to do it. Or, we don't want to have friendship with the world, so we're not going to go incarnate into places of need. Like first things first, get out there, be a missionary, and then let's fight those battles.
That's amazing. Well, I so appreciate what you guys are doing. I've got two questions. One for each of you. How can people learn more about what you're doing? And two, how can people be praying for you?
For us at the clinic, especially right now, maybe to persevere, to not lose heart, and to continue. And I think like a lot of our patients that are struggling or more high risk, it's like loneliness in this time is a major, major thing. And I think microchurches are perfectly equipped to meet some of those needs because it is a dispersed thing. But yeah, isolation and loneliness is a very real felt need during this time.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And if people want to learn more about what you're doing, is it undergroundclinic.com.org?
Yes.com. And you can get to the main Tampa Underground website too.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing all that. Brian, how about you?
Yeah, I was just going to add, for the clinic's sake, pray that we get some tests, because we really want to be a testing site, and we're working really hard. Kathryn and her team are working really hard to get tests. But I don't know if you know this or not, but sometimes the government isn't efficient and doesn't do things well. So it's been a bit of a struggle. We're basically like, look, let us test people. We'll do an outdoor thing. And they're just chasing their tails over there, trying to figure out this, getting testing in the hands of these providers. So we would love to be a part of that solution. And I actually would ask anybody listening, if you just take a second and just say, Lord, help them, get them tests. That'd be great. For me, I mean, I'm an introvert's paradise, so I'm fine. My greater prayer for the church, for us whole, we mentioned it before we came on, but just this idea of like post-traumatic growth. We're going through something hard in some ways. In many ways, it's hard. It's harder for some people than it is for others and so on. But we're going through something, and it is possible to walk away from this improved somehow through the grace of God, and hope. Hold on to some kind of hope. Believe that God is going to help his church. If you could have said like a year ago that every single church in America, if not the world, would be reconsidering what it means to be church, I would have said that's the greatest thing I can imagine happening. It's the greatest thing, like in a positive way, trying to figure out, who are we really? What does it mean to be the church? What does it really mean? And just for 1 second, put down these ideas that a church is a building on a corner that meets once a week. Nothing wrong with that. That's lovely. But surely we can be more than that. Surely we are meant to be more than that. And all of a sudden, man, everybody is asking that question. We're having to ask that question. So I don't know, just Holy Spirit, come into that questioning, into that openness that we feel, and make us like you, renew your people, renew your church somehow. That'd be my prayer.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I believe people can learn more about what you're doing at undergroundnetwork.org. Is that the website there?
Yeah, that's a great starting point. Yep. You can see a documentary there about the underground. You can look, I have a book called Underground Church, which is more like structural stuff. And then recently a book called Microchurches. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, that's probably there, I assume. So that's undergroundnetwork.org. It's a great place to go.
That's great. Well, I just want to pray for you guys before we get off, if that's cool with you.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
Lord, I lift up Kathryn and I lift up Brian and all their organizations and families and people they're connected with. I lift up the clinic and ask that you would give them wisdom for how to serve, that you would give them access to the right tools and resources and the green lights that they need to be able to really love their community during this time. Continue to give them fresh ideas and ways to serve. Same thing with Brian. I ask that you would really continue to give him wisdom as a leader in your church to inspire people to hope, to innovate, to see the opportunity in this moment. And I ask that you would position him in front of people that are asking those questions, and that this would be a time of great influence for him, for your kingdom. And so we just thank you for what you're doing in this time. We speak your blessing on both of them as well as on your church and on this world in this time, and ask for your healing to come. And we trust you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys both so much. Appreciate hearing your perspective on the amazing work that God's put you guys up to. Blessings on you both.
Thanks, Robin.
Thanks for tuning in, friends. If you believe in this vision of creative, cross-cultural Christianity and want to take your next step, we've got a few ideas for you. First, you could visit praisehands.com/volunteer to join one of our growing volunteer teams. We've got an operations team, a media team, and a digital street team, and we'd love to help you learn new skills, meet new people, and be a part of what we're doing. Second, you can financially support this show through a one-time or monthly donation at praisehands.com/donate. And lastly, help spread the word. Text this episode to a friend or even drop us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for your support, folks. We'll see you next week.